No one in Owarin dared speak her name without bowing. Queen Iduni was not born of silk. She became silk, and fire, and temptation. She ruled from the tallest ivory throne in the 7 kingdoms. Her voice could calm storms. Her wrath could summon drought. Her eyes were sharper than obsidian. Her skin, smooth and radiant like freshly poured midnight honey, glowed under the palace torches like it held secrets of the gods. The nobles said she was blessed by Ocean herself. The soldiers whispered that her hips held the power to make kings forget their crowns. But all the beauty in her kingdom, the carved marble statues, the towers gilded in lion gold, the men who fought for her name, none of it could touch the restlessness that clawed her heart. At night, when the stars lit the Owarin sky, she stood at her high balcony draped in sheer robes, a glass of palm wine in hand, the wind teasing the silk around her hips. And always she watched him. Tari, the bonded one, the commoner from the far hills of Enugu, captured during the border raids, given to the palace as tribute, a man the court called nameless. But to Iduni, he was unforgettable. He worked in silence, hands thick and strong, arms cut like carved ironwood. His body gleamed under the moon, not like a beaten man, but like a fallen prince, sentenced to labor by fate. Each night, she watched him rake the garden soil, lift heavy urns, tend to the fire flowers that only bloomed in darkness. And each night, she burned. There was something about him the court couldn't explain. His chains did not break him. His silence wasn't fear, it was control. Even the other servants gave him space. Even the palace guards avoided his eyes. But Queen Iduni couldn't look away. Some nights, she dreamed of him, not as her subject, but as her equal, her rival, her fire. She dreamed of his hands, not digging in soil, but on her skin, calloused palms learning the curves of royalty. And when she woke, her sheets clung to her thighs, her robe slid off her shoulders, and her breath came short, like she'd been chased by spirits. It had been a year since her last husband died of snakebite, a death that still stirred questions in the kingdom. Some said it was poison, some said betrayal. Iduni never spoke of it. She wore her widowhood like armor, cold, untouchable. Until Tari. One night, the moon was full and high. The drums from the royal kitchens had gone quiet. The servants had disappeared into their corners. Iduni stood barefoot, wearing only a crimson wrapper around her waist and a thin gold chain resting between her breasts. She walked silently through the palace. No guards, no fanfare, just her and the night breeze. Her skin glowed like warm bronze, her anklets whispering across the marble. She descended the side stairs and stepped into the garden. There he was, Tari, sweating, shirtless, lifting a clay water jar to his shoulder. His muscles rippled with each movement. His back glistened like polished onyx. He didn't see her at first, so she spoke. "Do you know who watches you each night?" He turned, slowly, deliberately, and when his eyes met hers, dark, steady, unreadable, the world between them collapsed. "I do." His voice was low, grounded, raw like fresh honey from a bee-stung tree. She stepped forward. "You work like you have something to prove." "Maybe I do." "You don't bow." "You haven't asked." She tilted her head, fire blooming in her throat. "What if I asked?" Tari slowly lowered the jar to the ground. The silence around them thickened like hot steam in a bathhouse. He stepped forward, not with fear, but with fire of his own, and whispered, "Then I'd bow." His voice was so close now, it warmed her ear, but not for the crown. Her breath hitched, for the woman. And then, as if the night itself demanded it, their bodies met like rain and dry earth. No royal trumpet announced what happened next. No scribe recorded how the queen of Owarin wrapped her silk-covered thighs around a man wearing chains, how her fingers ran down his sweat-slicked chest, how they kissed like warriors claiming territory. Under the fire flowers, between god-painted stars, Queen Iduni gave herself not to a king, not to a noble, but to the one man who made her feel seen. They were heat and shadow, teeth and whispers, hands and hunger. It wasn't just lust. It was rebellion. It was power. It was everything the crown had denied her. But passion doesn't live quietly. In the palace shadows, a jealous maid watched, her fists clenched, her breath sharp. She had loved Tari in secret, and now she saw everything. The queen, the forbidden touch, the moans that shouldn't exist. And she ran, not to the guards, but to General Abigund, the queen's most loyal sword, the man who had waited years for her love, the one who offered protection and received silence. Now silence was over. The maid whispered it all, and the general's face went cold. He clenched his jaw, his rage buried deep. She gave herself to a laborer? In the garden, with no shame. Abigund nodded. That night, he began writing a letter to King Baduru of the North, the queen's most dangerous suitor. She is unfit to rule, he wrote. She spills her crown for the touch of a commoner. Owarin is weak under her fire. He sealed it with blood and sent it with the hawk before dawn. And as Queen Iduni slept tangled in sweat and silk beside the only man who had ever touched her soul, war was already on its way. The moon hung low and golden that night, casting a soft glow over the palace, like the gods themselves leaned close to watch. Queen Iduni could not sleep. Her chambers, though filled with silk pillows, perfumed oils, and the gentle hush of flute music, felt too heavy. The silence pressed on her chest like a stone. Her skin burned from within, not from fever, but from longing. Longing she dared not name. She rose, alone. No maids, no guards, just the whisper of her anklets and the soft swish of her silk robe, thin, nearly translucent in the moonlight, as she moved barefoot through the quiet marble corridors of Owarin's royal palace. She walked like a spirit, a goddess, but a goddess haunted by flesh. Down the winding staircase she went, past golden statues and carved wooden lions, to the palace gardens below. And there he was, Tari, the one man she was told to forget, bent low under the palm trees, shirtless, his skin glistening with the sweat of labor, muscles taut with movement, breath slow and focused. He was tending to the night blooms, those rare flowers that only opened their petals when the stars were brightest. She stopped, her breath caught. He hadn't seen her, but she had seen enough. Enough to remember every line of his back, every ripple in his shoulders, every way his body moved like it belonged not in chains, but in command. "What is your name, commoner?" she said softly, voice low like a spell. He straightened, slowly. His eyes met hers. No fear, no groveling, just quiet fire. "Do you not already know it?" he asked. The air between them tightened. Her breath came shallow. She stepped closer. "Do you know who I am?" A smirk barely touched his lips. "You are lonely." Silence. Iduni stared at him, heart pounding, fury rising, not at his words, but at the truth of them. No one had spoken to her that way since she took the crown, not even her late husband. She didn't know if she wanted to slap him or taste him. She chose neither. Instead, she walked past him, brushing his arm just enough to leave fire on his skin. And then she paused under the moonlight. "Come," she said. Tari followed, through the rows of fireflowers, through the twisting vines and whispering shadows, until they reached the deepest part of the royal garden, where no guards patrolled and only owls watched from above. There, beneath the flowering archway, she turned to him. "Take off the chains," she whispered. He looked down at the iron cuffs, loose, rusted, more symbol than restraint, and he removed them. His hands were free, but his eyes, they never left her. Iduni stepped closer. The air between them cracked with tension, thick with the scent of jasmine and heat. She reached out, not as a queen, but as a woman, and touched his chest. His skin was warm, heartbeat steady, but his breathing faltered the moment her fingers traced down his sternum. "I'm not afraid of you," she said. "You should be." And then he kissed her, not gently, not cautiously, but like a storm that had been held back for years. Her hands wrapped around his shoulders, pulling him closer. Her robe slipped from one shoulder, silk cascading like water. His hands, calloused and strong, traced her spine like he'd memorized her in another life. And when their bodies pressed together, the garden itself seemed to exhale. They did not speak. They didn't need to. The language between them was older than the throne, older than kingdoms. It was in the curve of her back against the grass, It was in the way he breathed her name, like a prayer and a warning. It was in the sound she made when his lips found the softest parts of her. It wasn't just desire. It was defiance. Every touch between them spat in the face of class. Every kiss tore through the laws of lineage. She was royalty. He was property. But that night, in the hidden corner of a blooming garden, they were equals. They were flame and oil. And they burned. Again and again. But in the darkness, eyes watched. A young maid, no older than 16, had come searching for herbs for the queen's bath. She had seen them, bodies intertwined under the moonlight, the queen of Owarin gasping in the arms of a bonded man. She dropped her basket, but they didn't hear. She ran, feet pounding silently over grass, not to the head maid, not to the elders, but straight to the palace guards. Two stood watch near the east tower, eyes heavy from sleep. The girl whispered fast, breathless. There in the garden, the queen and the man, the bonded one. The guard straightened. One began to move. The other held him back. "Don't be foolish," he hissed. "Do you want your head on a spike?" "But the queen does what she pleases. We speak of this to no one." The girl's mouth hung open. She turned furious, confused. But she knew where else to go. To someone who had been waiting for a reason. General Abigund. Back in the garden, dawn threatened the horizon. Aduni lay on her side, head on Tari's chest, fingers tracing lazy circles over his ribs. "They'll come for you if they know," she whispered. "Let them," he said. "I would face 1,000 blades for one more night like this." She smiled, just slightly, and for the first time in years, Queen Aduni closed her eyes, not in duty, but in peace. But as she slept, a letter was already being written, a plan already unfolding, and a storm already coming, because the queen had touched fire, and fire always demands a price. By dawn, the garden was still. Queen Aduni lay in the arms of a man who should have never touched her, not by law, not by blood, not by kingdom. Yet in his presence, she felt more real than she had ever been in her royal bed. But as she rested beneath the flowering vines, the seed of betrayal had already taken root. The maid who had witnessed the sin had not returned to her quarters. Instead, her bare feet hurried across the stone halls of the palace, her breath sharp and shaking. She wasn't just afraid. She was furious, not because of what she saw, but because she had loved Tari in secret. And now the queen had him, stolen him, used him. So she ran to the one man in the palace who would burn with rage hotter than hers, General Abigund. Abigund was no ordinary soldier. He had stood beside Aduni since she was crowned, wielding the royal sword in her name. His muscles were forged in war, his loyalty once unquestionable. But loyalty is a fragile thing when pride is wounded. When the maid arrived at his quarters, her cheeks red and her voice trembling, the general was already awake, sharpening his blade. She dropped to her knees, head bowed. "My lord, forgive me, but I saw something last night, in the queen's garden." He said nothing, only looked down at her. She was with him, the garden worker, the one in chains. They were. She couldn't finish. She didn't need to. The air around them grew heavier than iron. Abigund's grip tightened on the blade. "Are you sure?" They were together, as man and wife. Silence. Then steel scraped stone as he set his sword down. He stood, towering, golden bands around his arms catching the light like fire. "Fetch me ink." And a hawk. That morning, while the palace awoke to the sound of drums and incense smoke, General Abigund sat in his private chamber, writing with the fury of a man betrayed. "To His Majesty, King Badur of the North, I write not as a traitor, but as a loyal son of Owarin. Your betrothal to Queen Aduni is threatened. She has dishonored the bloodline. Last night, I discovered her sharing flesh and breath with a common palace worker, one brought to our lands in chains. The people whisper already. The elders question her purity. The gods cannot bless such union. If you still wish to claim the throne of Owarin through marriage, you must act now, before scandal becomes ruin. Strike swiftly. Take what was promised. Save our kingdom from shame." General Abigund, royal commander of Owarin, he sealed the scroll with wax, stamped it with his own ring, not the queen's, and tied it with a red silk thread. By noon, the hawk had flown. By dusk, it had crossed into northern skies. And by the time Queen Iduni opened her eyes, stretching with a rare softness across her face, the enemy was already preparing for war. That evening, Iduni stood before her mirror, golden earrings dangling, robe freshly tied. She had not yet summoned Tari again, though her mind pulsed with thoughts of him. She could still feel his hands, the way he looked at her not like a queen, but a woman. For once, she didn't feel hollow. She didn't feel hunted by expectation. She felt alive. But life has a way of turning on you just when you begin to believe in it. A knock echoed through her chamber door. 3 short raps. 1 long pause. It was her signal with Abigund. She smiled faintly. Enter. He did, but there was no warmth in his face. No bow. No greeting. Only stone. My queen, he said coldly. We must speak. She tilted her head. What troubles you, General? He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer, slowly, deliberately, his boots loud against the polished stone. Do you love him? He asked. She blinked, her jaw set. Who? Don't insult me, Iduni. Her eyes flared. No one called her that. Not like that. You forget your place. No, he said. You forgot yours. She stiffened. You dare speak to your queen like this? He stepped even closer, now only feet away. I gave my life to this crown. I watched you wed a man you never loved. I protected your throne. And you gave yourself to a man who should be washing your feet, not lying in your arms. She said nothing, because there was no lie in his words, only pain and dangerous jealousy. She raised her chin. What have you done? He smiled, a bitter, broken thing. I warned someone who still honors tradition, who still knows shame. Her breath hitched. Who? He turned to leave, and said only one word, Badaru. The name fell like thunder. King Badaru of the North, her former suitor, ruthless, ambitious, denied her hand once before, now given a reason to march with an army. Iduni stood frozen. The robe on her shoulders suddenly felt like chains. She had risked everything for one night of truth, one night of passion, and now her kingdom would bleed for it. She called for her guard. Bring me Tari, now. But the guard did not move. He looked at the ground, eyes wide. He's gone, my queen. Smoke curled above the kingdom of Awarin like the breath of angry gods. The morning after Queen Iduni learned of the betrayal, thunder rolled, not from the sky, but from the ground itself. 1,000 hoofbeats, 1,000 spears. King Badaru of the North had answered the general's letter, and he brought war with him. He marched at the head of an army dressed in bone-white armor, faces painted in ash and coal. Drums pounded like war cries, shaking the hills. The people of Awarin climbed rooftops, clutching children and prayer beads, as dust clouds rose from the northern path. And in the palace, Queen Iduni stood still, dressed not in robes of silk, but in battle leathers woven with gold thread. Her crown sat beside her, untouched. She had not slept. Not since she heard the words, He's gone, my queen. Tari had disappeared into the night. No footprints. No message. No trace. The man who held her fire had vanished, and in his place came an army. Inside the royal court, voices shouted over one another. We must surrender before blood is spilled. Badar seeks the throne. Let him take the queen and end this. Awarin has never bowed to the north. But Iduni raised her hand. Silence followed like a wave crashing through the chamber. She looked not at her elders, not at the guards. She looked at Abigund, the man who had lit this fire. You betrayed me. The general stepped forward, unflinching. I saved you. From scandal. From ruin. You saved no one. You handed me over like tribute to a man who only ever wanted my crown. He lowered his eyes for just a second. Then what do you command, my queen? Her voice rang like steel. We fight. And so Awarin prepared for battle. Gates were sealed. Spears sharpened. The sacred drums were struck, summoning warriors from every hut and hill. Even the palace maids bound their hair and carried water to the walls. But Iduni did not stay behind. She mounted her black mare, sword at her side, riding to the front line, her gold-trimmed armor glinting in the sun. The people saw her and cheered. Queen Iduni, the lioness of Owarin. But her heart was not in the cheers. Her heart was in the garden, her mind in the shadows, where she had felt alive, where she had tasted truth, where she had lost Tari. As Badaru's army approached the outer gate, Iduni stood atop the battlements, eyes fixed on him. He rode a white stallion, taller than most men, with a cloak made of panther skin flowing behind him. His face was calm, arrogant, untouched by sweat. He raised his hand, and the drums fell silent. Then came his voice, clear, deep, and cruel. "Queen of Owarin," he shouted, "you stand alone. You rule alone. But now you will kneel, for love has made you weak." Gasps rose along the wall, but Iduni did not flinch. She stepped forward and spoke, her voice echoing from the walls. "Love did not weaken me. It revealed me." "Then you will burn with it," Badara snarled, signaling his army. The siege began. Fire arrows screamed into the sky. Stone crashed against the gates. The sound of steel rang louder than any drum. Owarin's warriors fought with fury, fueled not by duty, but by the queen's courage. Abigund, despite everything, led from the front. He struck down northern soldiers like a man possessed, but his eyes never left Iduni, not once. And in the midst of smoke and blood, a whisper spread. "A shadow moves through the trees." At the back of the battlefield, near the edge of the royal gardens, a figure emerged from the forest, covered in dust, wearing the cloak of a northern scout, but face bare, eyes sharp, and on his wrists, chains broken. Tari had returned. He moved like a ghost between tents, cutting ropes, sabotaging arrows, whispering warnings to Owarin guards in the dark. He had not run. He had gone to the north to learn their plan, to bring it back, to fight for her. As the northern army surged toward the final gate, Iduni fought like a goddess possessed. Her sword struck true. Her armor, dusted with ash and blood, gleamed like a final sunrise. But she was tired, and as her legs faltered, a spear came flying toward her from the smoke, and stopped midair. Caught by Tari, he stepped from the chaos, his chest bare, arms streaked with soot, eyes burning. The crowd gasped. Iduni stared. "You came back," she breathed. "I never left." He threw the spear back, striking down the northern captain. The tide shifted. With the queen and the warrior fighting side by side, Owarin rose again. The enemy began to fall back. By dusk, the last northern banner lay in the dirt. King Badaru, wounded, rode off with what men remained. He would not try again. Not after what he saw. Not after the queen he mocked stood stronger with a so-called servant than any king could match. That night, the fires of war turned into fires of celebration. But Iduni did not feast. She returned to the garden, and there, beneath the flowering archway, sat Tari, waiting. She walked to him, slowly, silently. Then finally she said, "I don't want a throne built on fear." "Then build one on truth," he replied. "Stay." He looked at her, eyes full. "If you'll have me, not as a servant, not in secret, but openly." She knelt before him, took his hand. "Then rise, Tari of Owarin, my equal, my protector, my king." Weeks passed. The fires of war faded. The bones of battle were buried beneath the soil of Owarin, and the drums of celebration quieted to a hum of peace. But something in the kingdom had changed. No longer did people bow in fear. They raised their heads in pride. No longer did whispers echo in palace halls. They sang with laughter and freedom. And at the heart of it all was the queen, Iduni, still regal, still powerful, but softened, grounded, whole. She no longer stood alone on her balcony at night. She stood with Tari, and the garden where they had once met in shadows, where desire had sparked rebellion, was now transformed. No longer secret, no longer shameful. It had become sacred. The Garden of Unity, they called it. On the morning of the crowning day, Iduni refused to wear the heavy gold robes of past rulers. Instead, she stepped barefoot into the garden, wearing a flowing cloth of indigo and earth brown, colors of the people. No royal crown on her head, no diamonds at her throat, just a single gold chain, tied gently around her wrist, the same one Tari had once been bound with. Beside her stood the warrior, no longer a slave, no longer a shadow, but a man known now across the land as Tari the True, the lion who had fought not for power, but for love. He wore traditional robes of kingship, woven by village mothers, dyed in cocoa bark and wildflower red. His broken shackles had been melted into rings of strength, now worn by the kingdom's soldiers as a symbol of freedom. The elders of Awarin gathered beneath the baobab tree, the same sacred tree where stories had always been told. The people surrounded them, children on shoulders, drummers in rhythm, and in the center, the queen and her warrior kneeled, not above the people, but among them. A hush fell, and the eldest woman of the council stepped forward, her skin like carved bark, her voice like wind over stone. She held the crown of woven gold and cowrie shells in trembling hands. Aduni, daughter of flame, Tari, son of thunder, today, you rule not as queen and consort, but as equals, as truth and courage, as the story we never thought we'd live to tell. She placed the crown not on Aduni's head, not on Tari's, but between them, and said, "Rule with your hearts open, or do not rule at all." Tears welled in Aduni's eyes, but she did not cry. She reached for Tari's hand. He took it, firm and steady, and together they stood. The people erupted in cheers, not forced, not rehearsed, but wild and real and loud. Drums exploded in rhythm. Women ululated in joy. Dancers leapt through the air. And in that moment, under a sky so blue it looked like it had been scrubbed by the ancestors themselves, the reign of the true crown began. That night, the palace held no feast in the great hall. Instead, the celebration returned to the garden. Lanterns floated in the trees. Musicians played near the koi pond. Children ran barefoot on the grass, where warriors once bled. And in the center of it all, Aduni and Tari danced, without protocol, without guards, without ceremony. Just skin, laughter, rhythm, breath. Even General Abigun stood at the edge of the gathering, his jaw tight, his pride still healing, but his hand pressed to his chest in respect. He had been wrong, but even wounded hearts can recognize love when it's real. Later that night, under the very archway where it had all begun, Tari whispered to her, "Do you regret it?" She turned to him, lips close to his ear. "Only that I didn't choose you sooner." He smiled. "Then let's never go back to before." She touched his cheek. "Only forward, as one." And beneath the stars, the queen kissed her king, not in secret, not in shame, but in the open garden that once held their sin and now cradled their salvation. They say to this day, in Awarin, lovers go to the Garden of Unity when they want their bond blessed by truth. They say if you walk barefoot through the night blooms, hand in hand, and whisper the names Aduni and Tari, the flowers will open wider, the moon will shine brighter, and the spirits of love and freedom will watch over you. And they say that no story in the kingdom is told more often, or with more tears and smiles, than the tale of the queen who chose love over power and found both.